We're going to begin this video with the Ford Probe. You're probably wondering, what does the Ford Probe have to do with the Mercury Cougar video? Well, it has a lot to do with it actually. So before we discuss the 1999 Mercury Cougar, basic knowledge of the Ford Probe is a prerequisite. So without further ado, let's dive in. There was a first generation Probe, a second generation Probe, and yes, there was going to be a third generation Probe too. This was a sporty coupe that first went on sale in 1988 for the 1989 model year. When this car first hit the streets, it was actually very groundbreaking from a design standpoint, especially coming from Ford, since nothing quite like this car was ever offered from them. The new Probe had a lot of Mazda components, being loosely based on the MX-6. If Ford had it their way, this would have become the fourth generation Mustang in North America, but that's a different story for a different video. So anyway, it got a refresh in 1990 and was redesigned for 1993. The sporty two-door hatchback competed with things like the Mitsubishi Eclipse, Toyota Celica, and other cars similar to that. This car was in production all the way up until 1997. But the year 1997 wasn't supposed to be the end of the road for the Probe, not at first anyway. Ford engineers had actually ended up designing a whole new third generation Probe, with design work completed during the mid-90s. This new Probe was scheduled for a 1998 model year launch, but things would be different this time around. The new Probe would shift its design from the Mazda MX-6 to a platform shared with the Ford Contour and Mercury Mystique. Sometime during late 1997, Ford announced that they would be getting rid of a lot of different two-door cars. For example, the Thunderbird was going away after 97. Then Mercury would get rid of the Cougar, and Lincoln would ditch the Mark 8 after the 1998 model year. Ford will have a refreshed SN95 Mustang that they called New Edge, and there will also be a new Ford Escort ZX2. Despite all of that, the Contour-based Ford Probe continued into production, but at the last minute, Ford decided to shift the vehicle to the Mercury division to adopt the Mercury Cougar name. So that meant the would-be third generation Ford Probe would instead become the 8th generation Mercury Cougar. Mercury introduced the new Cougar at the 1998 Los Angeles Auto Show. The last Probe year was 1997. They skipped the 1998 model year, and the new Cougar's initial year was 1999. So before we dive in even further, let me clear up the confusion. Many believe that the Escort ZX2 replaced the Probe, but that is simply not true. Even websites like Wikipedia suggest that the ZX2 is a successor to the Probe. Sure, the ZX2 came after the Probe was dropped from the lineup, but Ford never really intended for this small economy car to fill the role of the Probe. Just think about that for a moment. The car that was originally intended to be the new Mustang, now being replaced by the Ford Escort. The Ford Escort always offered a variety of body styles and always offered a two-door counterpart, and that's really all the ZX2 was, a two-door Escort variant. On the flip side, the 1999 Mercury Cougar was more of an indirect replacement for the Probe. After all, the new Cougar was supposed to have been the new Probe. Just because this new car shared the same name as the old ones did not mean it was marketed to the same demographic. For example, the average age of the 1997 Mercury Cougar customer was 65 plus. The average age of the 1997 Ford Probe was anywhere from 25 up to 45. And Mercury wanted to entice that younger group of people with this new car. Regardless of the year, the MN12 Cougar attracted senior buyers just like the Grand Marquis. That said, older and loyal customers that were interested in the old Cougar were less interested in this new one. For that 65 and up crowd that still wanted the personal luxury the old Cougars were known for, well, they could just forget about that. This new Cougar was all about looking cool and feeling sporty. On the other hand, those that were interested in the Probe would find the new Cougar very similar and would be equally interested in it. The only thing this car and the ZX2 had in common is that they were both marketed to younger buyers. The body design used a philosophy that Ford called New Edge. Ford cars in Europe had the New Edge design, and cars in North America were getting the New Edge treatment. The Cougar's body and the New Edge idea in general was introduced as a concept called the Mercury MC2 in 1997. This was the first front-wheel drive Cougar ever. Along with shifting its drive wheels, it also shifted market segments, going from two-door personal luxury coupe to three-door sport compact. Especially during this time in the late 90s, almost every Mercury had a Ford equivalent. I guess the Villager is the odd man out, but it wasn't nothing but a Nissan Quest anyway. Since the 1991 to 1994 Mercury Capri, the Mercury Cougar was the only car sold without a Ford equivalent in North America. At first, sales were looking pretty good, but this car ended up struggling quite a bit. The Sable and Grand Marquis were flying off the lot. However, that loyal 65 and up crowd felt a little bit alienated with this new Cougar. While coupes had traditionally been offered in Lincoln Mercury dealerships for several decades, the shift of the Cougar from personal luxury to sports compact created a challenge to sales personnel. It was very awkward for Mercury car dealers. First of all, they had to try to sell luxury segment cars to first-time car buyers. Also, they had to figure out a way to attract younger buyers into Mercury showrooms, a car brand that had the stereotype of not necessarily being for young people. In 2002, Ford announced another restructuring of its model line. 2002 would be the final year for the Cougar, Mercury Villager, Lincoln Continental, and Ford Escort, although the ZX2 would carry on for a little bit. The Ford Contour and Mercury Mystique was really just a variant of the Ford Mondeo Mark II. Well, anyway, that car ended production in 2000. The last Mercury Cougar rolled off the assembly line in August 2002. After that, Mercury offered no cars with 4-cylinder engines until the 2006 Milan. The 1999 Cougar shared the Ford CDW 27 platform. This is the platform that was introduced by the Ford Contour. As far as engines, this generation of Cougar had a far more contemporary package, with modern dual overhead cam 24-valve 6-cylinder Duratec engines. If you wanted a V8, forget about it. This time, the most you could get was 6 cylinders. The 1999 to 2002 Cougars were available with 2 engine options: the 2-liter Z-Tech straight 4 engine with 125 horsepower and a 2.5-liter Duratec V6 with 170 horsepower. Then there was the manual transmission or the automatic transmission. Sport package models of the V6 featured 4-wheel vented disc brakes, 16-inch alloy wheels, fog lights, and the speed governor raised, not removed, contrary to popular belief. The manual transmission version of the car, when given enough road, was capable of reaching speeds around 145 miles per hour. Without the sport package, the speed governor was set at 115 miles per hour due to the H-rated tires that the car was riding on. A high-performance Cougar S was planned, but this car never happened. If this car did happen, it would have been nothing more than a Cougar with a Contour SVT engine. It was also to be sold in Europe as the Ford Cougar ST200. The first Mercury Cougar came out in 1967, and this was pretty much a longer and a little bit more upscale version of the super popular Mustang at the time. The first generation won over buyers with those hideaway headlights and standard V8. This was the only Mercury to ever win Motor Trend's Car of the Year award. It grew and grew and grew some more. Its subsequent generations became overgrown, being unofficially classified as land yachts. At one point, the Mercury Cougar was even offered as a family wagon. The Cougar's glory was revived in its 6th generation when it shared the Fox platform with the Mustang, and the 7th generation Cougar was built on the same dedicated MM12 platform as the Ford Thunderbird. So as we discussed in this video, in 1999, Ford introduced the 8th generation Cougar, which actually moved down market. So it moved from being a personal luxury coupe down to a 3-door front-wheel drive sport compact. It used the Ford World Car platform that also underpinned the Contour in America and the Ford Mondeo in Europe, with 4-corner independent suspension and that platform's well-respected dynamic abilities. The Cougar was not a super stellar performer. If straight line performance was your one and only objective, Ford rather you just get a Mustang GT. But either way, the Cougar still got the job done. The 8th generation car was only offered with an economy car inline 4 that produced 125 horsepower and 130 pound-feet of torque, or a Duratec 2.5-liter V6 that produced 170 horsepower and 165 pound-feet of torque. Aside from its lackluster straight-line performance, MotorWeek was only able to get a 0-60 time of 7.9 seconds with the V6 and 5-speed manual. But everything isn't always about speed and going fast in a straight line. The new Cougar was acknowledged for its playful handling characteristics. And just like the OG Probe, this car also competed with things like the Eclipse and the Celica. In 2001, the car got a facelift, which I think looks great. The styling is what truly set this car apart though. It has some of the curves that were so common in 90s car designs, but it managed to incorporate the curves without looking like a jelly bean. It had dramatic cat eye headlights, and come to think about it, it did kinda look like a cat. But to be fair, it is named after a species of feline after all. I just wonder if this car actually became the 3rd generation Probe, if it still will look the same way it did, especially up front. Around back, it had unique bulges on the giant triangular taillights. The design was risky, yet well executed, and it was definitely nothing like the ones that came before it. Overall, the 8th generation Mercury Cougar shows simultaneous risk-taking and restraint in its design, and I think it deserves a lot more attention and recognition than it gets. Don't see too many on the road nowadays, but when I do see one, I am sure to take notice. Alright, so that's it for this one. Let us know if you owned or drove one of these Cougars, or any Cougar for that matter, regardless of the generation. Alright, can't wait to hear you guys' comments, and I will catch you on the next video.